This fact just dawned on me, but we could already be in World War III and not even know it. There's people within our own very government saying right now that the United States faces more threats, more enemies, it's fighting on more fronts than they did since World War II, and they're not wrong. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is the United States doing this? Why did Donald Trump flip-flop? What is the bigger goal and objective here? And in this video, we're going to address that. And to me, it's very simple. It's about maintaining the U.S. petrodollar, maintaining U.S. hegemony all around the world, keeping the dollar as the world reserve currency, establishing an Israeli, Saudi Arabian, Sunni led dominance of the Middle East, and of course, making the military-industrial complex, aka the deep state, more powerful and more rich. I'm going to explain that and a lot of other news that, of course, you will not hear on the American mainstream media. Now, moving on, there is no way any rational human being could objectively look at Donald Trump's response and justification for his latest actions and believe them. There is no humanitarian cause or purpose. All you have to do is look back at American history to understand the duplicitous messages and hypocrisy. There's a bigger thing at hand here. And right now, the stakes couldn't get any higher as North Korea is preparing for war, ordering its citizens to evacuate its cities, telling foreign journalists in North Korea to prepare for a big and important event as China prepares its military, and Donald Trump announces that he will go it alone if China doesn't help him, and is sending an armada of naval ships towards North Korea right now, as North Korea is preparing to celebrate the 105th birthday of its founder on April 15th, just a few days from now. It will be very interesting to see how China potentially responds to a global conflict between North Korea and the United States, but it's not only China the United States has to worry about, but Russia, which even our own Secretary of State Tillerson said that relations are at a low point between these two nuclear-armed countries. As Russia is advancing its advanced nuclear weapons, we are seeing conflicting talk from the United States. The current breaking news on the quagmire in Syria is President Donald Trump announcing that he is not sending troops into Syria. But people are forgetting that he already did send troops inside of Syria just weeks ago, and that he has been continuing to flip-flop majorly. Of course, the Russians don't believe him, as they're saying that the U.S. is planning more missile strikes inside of Syria, leaving many people here in the United States asking, what the malarkey? Trump, what are you really doing? He previously tweeted how the United States should never attack Syria, how this potential conflict would not only cost resources, money, and be a big waste of time, but also potentially cause World War III, and now he is tweeting congratulations to his military for attacking Syria. He tweeted previously that China is not a friend of the United States, and now he just tweeted how it was a great honor to meet with the Chinese president, and he will no longer call them a currency manipulator. Just today, he said NATO is not obsolete after previously saying it was. So why did Donald Trump recently join the forces of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and decide to attack the Syrian government that has been fighting them? Why did he flip-flop on Bashar al-Assad, on Janet Yellen, on NATO being obsolete, on export-import banks, and on China being a currency manipulator? Well, you have to understand, Donald Trump is following procedures that have been carried out by George W. Bush and Barack Obama before him, clear set orders and rules and plans that former NATO Secretary Wesley Clark exposed a few years ago, where he said the Pentagon in 2002 had a plan to get rid of 7 countries in 5 years. Now, I confronted General Wesley Clark about the continuation of this plan just a few years ago, and he looked like he saw a freaking ghost. This is a video you must see. It will be in the description below. But Wesley Clark outlined a plan by the U.S. Pentagon to get rid of Iraq, Libya, Lebanon, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. A plan that was supposed to be secret until he released it. And guess what? We have been seeing the mimic of this plan by Donald Trump, especially when he introduced his immigration travel ban, where he banned 7 countries, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Libya, and Yemen, from traveling to the United States, further angering and destroying relations with those countries. Now, if you replace Yemen with Lebanon, this is the same trajectory that the U.S. Pentagon was planning for all the way back in 2002. And as soon as we saw that, we were like, what is Donald Trump doing here? Why is he following through those plans, angering those nations? Told you should be skeptical of Donald Trump, not trust him, be careful of his next moves, and the intervention of the deep state on his campaign. And guess what? He has been carrying out those programs, leaving many people to question, wait, why wasn't his arch nemesis, Saudi Arabia, which he called out during the election campaign as being the finances of terrorism, why weren't they on the travel ban list? Well, we're going to explain that. And to understand that, you have to understand the petrodollar. One of the main reasons why the United States is as powerful as it is right now is because of the global trade and commerce in US dollars. In 1971, Nixon shocked the United States after abandoning the international gold standard and moved it towards a fiat system which became valued on the petrodollar. Now, the US petrodollar was created after Henry Kissinger struck a deal with Saudi Arabia in 1973 that maintained the US dollar use and dominance in world trade. According to this deal, Saudi Arabia could increase oil prices, but the stipulations was that they had to sell their oil for US dollars only in the international market. Additionally, the United States guaranteed continuous rule of House of Saud, and US also pledged military support to Saudi Arabia to help maintain its security. Now, with this major decision in 1973, if Saudi Arabia ever decided to change the system or to receive money in another currency except for the US dollar, the dollar would collapse. And this, of course, would explain the cozy relationship that the United States has been having with the #1 financer of global terrorism, jihadism, the #1 exporter of Wahhabism, you know, the country that persecutes women and kills gays. Yeah, that country, Saudi Arabia, establishing mainly a Sunni alliance with Saudi Arabia and, of course, Israel in the region to dominate against any other threats. And as we know, Saudi Arabia, even though it has been declassified that they had a role in the 9/11 terrorist attacks on American soil, they really hate Iran because Iran threatens the Middle East hegemony from them since they are both major oil producers. And the United States, with Israel and Saudi Arabia, have been working together in order to topple Iran, which further explains why Syria and Iran are working together and fighting alongside together against the rebels inside of Syria that Israel has been helping and Saudi Arabia has been financing along with the United States. Now, some people believe that this is all over a pipeline, but I believe it's a lot bigger than this. And the pipeline theory does make sense on some aspects, since Saudi Arabia and Qatar would potentially build a pipeline through Syria that would go into Europe and, of course, bypass Russia's dominance of the oil trade inside of Europe. And if Saudi Arabia would be able to pull this off, they could guarantee more control over the United States, since the US petrodollar would rise, and at the same time squash out their competition, Iran, who also has been doing major oil deals and trade deals with China. Now, another factor in this is that if Syria falls, Israel would be able to grab the Golan Heights region, which has been contested between the two nations for a very long time now. Turkey already is moving its border inwards towards Syria, and if Syria falls and becomes a balkanized nation, both Iran, China, and Russia would lose a key ally and their representative inside of the Middle East. As we know, Syria has been closely aligned with China and with Russia. It's also interesting to see that Iran has been financing Hezbollah and also the Palestinians inside of Israel. And of course, Israel still sees that as a threat, which explains the diabolical alliance that they have made with Saudi Arabia and the United States. Now, all doesn't look good for the US petrodollar. If you look at American foreign policy, it has been dictated by bombing, destroying, and toppling states that threaten it or decide not to participate in the petrodollar system, as we have seen with Iraq, who started selling oil in euros instead of dollars, and then shortly after they were destroyed. Iran has been labeled one of the major enemies of the United States, and they, in 2012, stopped participating with the US petrodollar. The same goes for Libya, that decided to trade in gold-backed dinar and set up a Pan-African Union currency, and shortly after, that country was also destroyed and overthrown. But here's the bigger story here. In 2015, Russia began selling oil to China, not on the US dollar. China started building up its own commodities market, and they created a Shanghai Gold Exchange, backing their yuan on the gold standard. Just a few days ago, on April 2nd, 2017, before Donald Trump decided to launch Tomahawk missiles inside of Syria against the ally of China and Russia both decided to join forces to bypass the US dollar in global markets, shifting towards the gold trade. And this leads to a very serious situation that is affecting us with domestic policy, economic policy, and of course foreign policy. Domestically, we have seen Donald Trump abandon his economic reform in order to embrace military spending. He has dramatically increased military spending as well, while cutting back domestic programs in the United States. And of course, the dollar is in trouble, which could explain Donald Trump's latest flip-flop on Janet Yellen, cozying up to the current Federal Reserve chair, since ultimately they have been playing the Ponzi scheme game of the US petrodollar for a very long time. And they hold the key to artificially keep the US economy running, even though it's based on digital zeros that no one could really verify, but only stand because of trust and use. And with that kind of inflated, bloated, debt-ridden system, it cannot coexist with reality. And sooner or later, the American public will have to face the consequences of this rigged system. Also, interesting to note, one of the countries that doesn't have a central bank in this world is North Korea. With all this happening, I'm going to keep my eyes on China since they have publicly criticized the United States for bombing their ally Syria. And to me, this situation unfolding between China and the United States will have the biggest impact. But one thing that is very clear is that this cannot continue for any longer. As American foreign policy becomes more aggressive, it is creating instability all around the world in order to protect its hegemony. And with Donald Trump feeding the military-industrial complex and the deep state with more finances and digital money that's virtually made up, it's leading to a catastrophic situation which we're seeing unfold on the world stage right now. I just don't understand why they won't release the free energy devices so we don't have to do this insane thing. But whatever, that's just my opinion on the situation.